stuff like that. And we've just known each other for a long time. And I moved a long ways away for a little while, but we still kept in touch, and you guys came and visited. And I can tell you guys right now that Jeremiah has a big, huge heart for people and for counseling. And this has been his passion for years. And Jeremiah, I'll let you introduce yourself as well. And
Sure.
You and I talked about that because you know what got you to where you are now in the way of counseling better than I do. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jason. No, it's actually a real honor and privilege to be here for sure. A lot of fun. I know, for those who know us, we're the guys who would always occasionally go out for coffee, and and it's like, obviously, yeah, there you go. I'll have my water, you have your coffee. So
That's right.
you, as Jason knows, and other people who get to know me, you don't want me on coffee because I'm caffeine sensitive, and that's not a good thing. People can't concentrate and hear me talk because my eyes are dilating too much, right? It's not a good thing. So I've been, my background really is variety. It's a broad background. For over 25 years I did not-for-profit. That's everything. We're working with children, working in brain injury, I even worked at the Mustard Seed for a period of time, working with homelessness. The last 5 years before I went solo as a private practice, I was working in the Forest Lawn area in a collaborative service delivery program with Children's Services.
Yep.
That, of course, meant, though, I'm working with multiple parents, single, married, not married, all sorts of different parenting structures. And that, of course, led to a whole bunch of different I'll just say counseling opportunities that were even broader than other ones that I dealt with before. Everything from various addictions to domestic violence to you name it. So that's kind of my brief background. About 9-10 months ago or so, I made a bit of a leap of faith, I call it, and just really, my heart was really kind of just felt led that I just needed to start a private practice. Some opportunities came by, and here I am doing private practice for New Life Counseling. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Yeah.
And that's awesome, because I've, to a degree, been on this journey with you of wanting to get to where you are now.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
And of course, it's not really a destination; it's just the start of another journey.
It really is.
Right. Yeah. But I'm really happy for you. I don't know if I have told you that. I think I have, but I'm very happy for you as well.
Thank you.
And like I said earlier in the broadcast, you definitely are. Or I said to you earlier, I said you're called and you're gifted and you have a talent for this. And so I'm glad that folks get to glean from that tonight. Of course, you and I talked. Nobody has all the answers, right?
No.
And sometimes when people are watching these things, they're just like hoping that they find out the meaning of life. Do you know what I mean? Like there's that degree of stuff.
Sure.
But we're going to bring some things up tonight that I really believe will help people. And so that being said, let's get into it here tonight. So we're talking tonight about how to deal with sudden change. And of course, I mean, how to deal with change, period. But we thought to use the word sudden change because let's admit that's how this came on all of us. I don't even want to use the word because we've seen it so much in the news and stuff, but this particular virus and this whole lockdown, shutdown, isolation, whatever you want to call it, this was very sudden. And of course it had to be, we understand that. But we want to give people some things tonight. Mostly we want to hear from Jeremiah, some things that can help people. And so I just have a prologue here that I'd like to read, help us get us going here. Everyone's life is a life of change. It's so true, isn't it? We experience changes in work and relationships, changes in our physical and mental health, and new events in our local communities, cities, and world, although we all have our own world that we live in. Many people spend a great deal of time and energy trying to avoid change, which I'm sure, Jeremiah, you have dealt with. I know that I have done that as well at times, but it's inevitable. Change catches up to all of us. However, we can learn to cope and change better and thus lower the risk of anxiety and depression. Our relationships can flourish and our body can feel healthier. But if we can't cope with change, only a minor amount of stress can make us feel overwhelmed by life. We might also struggle to set and meet the goals that we have for ourselves. The idea of coping with change is sometimes called resilience, which I'm sure Jeremiah will probably talk about tonight as well. Though your environment and personality type might influence your level of resilience, the amount isn't set in stone. In other words, we can develop more. Practicing different ways of thinking and being in the world can boost our ability to deal with change and help us build a life that adapts much quicker and more purposefully to new places and unexpected events. And so I've asked Jeremiah tonight to share with us 3 things that could help us to deal with sudden change. And I said to him earlier before we get on the broadcast here, not just deal with sudden change when it happens, but be prepared. Like you can't prepare for changes you don't know what the changes are, but you can be prepared for how you handle changes no matter what they are. And that's really what we want to help you guys with here tonight. And so Jeremiah, you were sharing a few things with me, and maybe you can share with us tonight. You actually call this system something as well. It's something that you've developed. Why don't you go ahead and start with that and share with us?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Really what we're talking about, is a couple different things. And I'm going to share, obviously we talked about earlier about what are kind of 3 basic things. And I'm going to, it's going to sound, and I'm going to be honest, you need to be ready. It's going to be so ridiculously simple.
Yeah,
but right now we kind of need simple, just basic strategies that can be utilized. And out of that, we're going to kind of break things down, and depending where the conversation leads, the ebbs and flows of our talk tonight, definitely we want to expand on that. So it's not just 3 things,
right.
But and it's more focused specifically on, with the COVID-19, crisis and situation, whatever you want to call it, that we're in right now, Jason.
Yeah.
But really, before we even go to that, I love how you talk about that word change, because there's one thing that change has that we sometimes forget about, that is polar opposite, kind of like a magnet. You got your positive and negative side, right? There's always 2 sides to a different coin that we have to look at. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. Change is one of those things that's a very neutral word, Jason.
Yep.
It can be positive change, it can be negative change, right?
Exactly.
And so here's the one thing with change, okay, is that it's all the other side of the coin, as it were, of change, good or bad, is loss. So it's interesting when we talk about concepts like grief and loss, okay, when we talk about areas of trauma, areas of depression, anxiety, all those kind of areas, those are things that are all about dealing with loss. And that can be good or bad. Hey, I am so glad that the choices and changes that I've made in the last year within my life regarding business-wise. But I'll tell you, I did have a period of time going, did I make the right decision? There was a little bit of that loss,
Yeah,
there was a little
absolutely.
bit of that. Yeah. And, you would know as well, we've talked about this in the past, when you make, whether it's a business change, a geographical change, all of these different things, they're forms of loss. Now, of course, there's the big ones too, right? And we're seeing that as well with COVID-19. I've already come into contact with individuals who have actually significantly felt either loss due to COVID-19, or the fear of, hey, I've got a family member, they're in a situation, that they are surrounded, and again, I really got to give a shout out, it's very important. For all of those who are in the health capacity of working, nurses, doctors, all of that. I've got friends myself that are personally, they're nurses, they're working. I've got one in particular, a close friend of mine. They work at Peter Lougheed. They're working through it, and they are there. And so they're having to work through all of that loss and the fear and all those different changes that are happening that are going on right now as we speak. So definitely, my heart goes out to everyone that way.
I like what you said there too, about it's not just being personally affected. Because when I brought up resilience there, just in the introduction, there are some personality types that are more resilient. I think most people will get this reference of Joel Osteen, but he gets made fun of because he's so happy all the time. And I'm sure most people, whether they're people of faith or not, have seen him somewhere on TV or something. But it actually is more his personality type. But in stuff that I've read, he has said, that he has to work on things as much as other people. But what I'm saying is, we're gonna have people during this that are going to be more resilient people. But I like what you said. They're going to have people in their lives that aren't as much. And so, it'd be awesome too with these things tonight if they can help other people with what they hear as well. So,
well, what's interesting with that is because of social isolation, because of this new norm that we're all encountering and stuff like that, I'll tell you, I would say on average right now for Canada, at least 3 weeks of isolation that people either have had to impose or have developed and finally gone, no, I need to develop isolation, you know, those kind of concepts. There's still loss within that. And I'll tell you right now, I'm noticing, and I could be wrong, but I'm noticing the introverts, they are going crazy right now because it's like, I've got no one to physically touch. I've got no one to physically be with. You know, I want to just go out. I want to.
You mean extroverts? You said introverts.
Did I say extroverts? There you go.
Yeah, I think
Just
the introverts
I was testing you, Jason.
Yeah, there you go. I think the introverts are completely opposite. The introverts are like, this is heaven.
The introverts are 3 weeks away. All right. Because here's the thing. We're all wired for connection, Jason.
Absolutely.
I don't care if it's, you know, from your background, from pastoring, whether it's someone who's got different belief systems or ideologies, we are all, the one thing that's in common is we are all created for connection.
Absolutely.
And it's not a matter of if, but when the introverts will also be like, oh man, you know, that's kind of the different, you know, it's like, we've talked about this, you know, you remember that movie with Tom Hanks, he's on the island, Castaway or whatever. Yeah. And he's got Wilson, you know, I believe he was you know, from a character standpoint, he was a raging extrovert and he just needed someone to talk to.
Yeah.
Now, if it was more of the introvert side of things, chances are maybe give them another 3 months and they would have been then talking to Wilson. You know, you're right. It would be like a holiday for them. You know, those kind of situations, but
for sure.
Yeah. So, but anyways, I don't want to get off too topic. You know, one of the messages that I've been sharing with clients and everyone alike is really just sort of 3 primary themes, and we're going to break them down and stuff like that. And that is the first one. Well, it's out of that term of social isolation, but we can actually utilize this, and we have to utilize this in a healthy way, in a healthy boundary. All right, is another way that we can use that term. And that is create space. All right. But it's not just create space. All right. Being separate from each other, subdividing that into 2 different categories. There's creating space for ourselves individually. We still have to have our time.
Yeah.
Introvert or extrovert, ambivert, whatever you call it. We still need our own time. We still need our time. In your case, you need your time to have that time of prayer. You know, we all need that time for just reflection, you know, introspection. That's maybe a little easier for the introvert side, but we still need that time and space, because here's what's on the other side. And this is our family. Okay. These are our loved ones. These are the people that we live with, that we're with. Now that's a little different if you're single. Okay. And that's a different topic, you know, where we've got to figure out some creative solutions to create that connection. Okay. And we can talk about that as well as we go on in this session. But when we're in this situation, here's what happens. We have to also intentionally create space for family. So this is also an opportunity to spend intentional time with your mom, with your dad, if you're a child, for a parent to spend time with your daughter, with your son, okay, with your family, grandma, those kind of situations. What happens is the 2 get blurred together and those boundaries aren't put together. And what ends up happening is we have clash and conflict.
Yeah. Would you call that the cabin fever that we talk about?
Oh, absolutely. That's and we are seeing it.
Yeah.
I'm hearing already reports, and I think we are going to see those reports as we move along down the road. Yeah. I mean, if your relationship has already been in trouble, if it already has been on a little bit rocky and a little bit edgy, oh, you're in this part right here. And that's where we got to create space. So, hey, I'm overwhelmed. I need some space. I want to deal with this. Okay, we got to create some space. All right. And we can talk about that as far as some boundary for relationships and stuff like that down the road. So keep that in the back of your mind there. So the second area, all right, and the 2 and 3 are kind of similar sounding, but there is a subtle difference. The second one is routine. Okay. So out of creating space, we still need to create routine, okay? And out of any form of loss, all right, when we talk about grief and loss, from a loved one passing away, all the way down to losing a job, okay? All the way to being just stuck and isolated. Oh my gosh, now I'm working at home and I'm having to work with my family, and I'm having to do my job online, all these different things, whatever it is, it looks like. Okay.
And actually, that you said the space and then the routine, those now for everyone have shrunk.
Yeah, it's
right?
more compressed.
It's more compressed
than ever before. It's not like I can just go out to the park and do something or go see a friend. I just need a no. And that's why the space part's very important. And then out of that, we have to develop routine. Okay. In that routine, it's basically what is it that I normally do? Even though I'm in house, what would I normally do? Well, if I normally got up and went for a 10-minute walk in the morning, you still need to go for that walk 10 minutes in the morning. That's right. If you walked your dog, you got to still get up and walk the dog. All right. Don't fall into this trap of going, oh, I guess it's 3:00 in the morning and I guess we'll go to bed now. You've lost routine, and that's going to mess you up. And that's actually when we talk about concepts like trauma, and because this is a form of a crisis, and crisis is based on trauma. Which is based on grief and loss. So when we talk about this loss, okay, the sudden change that happens, if we don't have routine, there are consequences that we can fall ourselves into. So if you're an individual who's like, man, I don't even know if today's Tuesday or Wednesday, I just feel so lost. Routine is key for you to get into that routine. Okay. The third area, and then we can just break it out into however we want to deal with things, okay, or whatever topics, is creating normalcy. It's not just routine and doing things I always did. Part of that, though, is the consequence of doing that is leads into normalcy, okay? Just so even in my isolation, hey, I'm still doing what I normally do. It creates a normal, hey, this is my new normal. Great. Everyone's saying new normal. That doesn't help. So how do we get to that new normal? Well, it's by creating space. It's creating routine, still doing the same things we normally would do or similar to that. And then that leads to normalcy. So this allows a form of control, all right, or predictability that right now we don't have. We don't have predictability right now. We don't know when this is going to be over. Hey, if this is over by a miracle in 1 month, poof, something happens, great. I am all for that. But at the same token, if things do go until July, August, oh my gosh, God forbid, September, okay, hey, we have to create normalcy. And that's how we create our new norm. And that allows us to control the things that we can then have predictability over, the things that we don't have control over, such as COVID-19.
You know, I think this is the first time that our generation, I mean, I'm not going to try to divide up the generations too much. You and I are Gen Xers. And so I think millennials are behind us, but these few generations, this is the first time that we've experienced this degree of something, right? Like we haven't gone through World War I, obviously World War I, World War II. We haven't gone through the dirty 30s, as it was called, the Great Depression. But the world at those times, you know, most of the world anyways, was forced to do what you're talking about tonight.
Oh, I'll tell you. And this is where we can utilize things for an advantage, okay? In that, you know, back, it was 1918, I believe, is when the Spanish flu. Basically, after World War I, the Spanish flu was a worldwide epidemic. That was the last worldwide epidemic that happened. They didn't have, you know, the telephone. They didn't have tele. They didn't have computers.
They didn't have this.
What we're doing, this is unprecedented, you know. So it's kind of one of those bitter, ironic things that we're all having to deal with, right? I mean, it's, you know, a month ago before COVID broke out, I just put out a blog talking about being immobile. So it's iMobile. It was like a play on words that I came out with when I was doing an interview with someone else. And it was talking about how we so focus on this iPhone generation that we get immobile, right? That's good. Yeah. Do you get it? And I'm
going to use that.
Yeah, there you go. So iMobile. And what that does is it creates, okay, a social isolation that creates social anxiety. So people, the younger generation, this is normal. But it also is demonstrated to be showing an increase in social anxiety when I'm actually face to face. In fact, there are people who this is even hard because it's just easier to talk on the phone. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the big joke today that I was hearing, about is that it's the, a lot of newscasters, it's kind of the joke running around, I guess, that, who's wearing pants, right? You just see my shirt and just, yes, I got pants.
Yes.
So have to prequel that. So
I did that for our first live Sunday service 3 weeks ago. I saw that joke got around and I lifted my leg up and I said, just so you guys know I'm wearing pants. My wife was over on the couch and she's just like, yeah. And so, no, this is really good. And so the 3 are create space. Number 2 is routine, and number 3 was normalcy.
Creating normalcy. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's more of a consequence of the routine, but
for sure. Yeah.
But we still out of that normalcy, right? And here's the thing too, this is an opportunity as well, if we choose to view it that way. And I don't mean to say it's easier said than done, but here's the thing. It's if maybe I know I should get up in the morning and go for a 10-minute walk. Man, this is a great time to start creating new healthy habits to create that normalcy. All right. Okay. And again, it's not from an unhealthy perspective of what we talk about a lot of times in counseling about, the negativities of control, but I'm talking about the control aspect of creating safety within our life in order to be able to know and be and have predictability within our life, which we need to have, routine,
I think that needs
consistency.
to be. That needs to be understood in a family context as well. So let's say a family, like we're a family of 5. Of course, we're not completely stuck inside. As you said, we can go outside and go for walks. We can do the 2-meter social distancing. But I think to create space too, there needs to be some understanding within the family unit, because if just one person understands this and they're like, hey, I need to create some space. People are like, oh, well, aren't you being selfish? You understand what I'm saying? There needs to be some understanding in the family unit that everybody is going to need their space. This is something as a family that we've understood for years, and you know our family well. One of our kids, our middle child, she's more introvert. So we know she needs space. The other 2 aren't as much. My wife and I are different that way as well. I am definitely not introvert, as you know, as most people aren't. If you know me at all, I grew up.
You're going crazy in this time, right?
I grew up introvert, though. I grew up introvert, even to the point that people thought I was a snob. But so Mom's like, well, Mom said, well, the Proverbs say he who shows himself friendly has many friends. So I literally made a life decision to become more extrovert. However, if I'm around people for a time, I get charged, but if I'm around people too long, I get drained. Yeah. And that's that introvert side.
And just so you know, that terminology has been modified in the last few years to be called an ambivert. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So it's someone who tends to be either one or the other. Maybe they're not even sure which, but they can flow in each one. And that's an ambivert. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So this creates space then. If you're in a family unit, there might need to be what we call, and I'm sure other families do, a family talk.
Sure.
And to be quite honest, we had that when we saw where this was going. We had the family talk, and we live in a duplex. It's nice. It's a nice duplex. You've been to our house, but we only have so many rooms and space, and so we had to have a family talk, and we had to have a family understanding of what you're talking about. That we need that space. Each of us needs particular space. And you know what? I'm glad we did that, because it's been pretty smooth.
Absolutely. Yeah. And out of that, you're going to get different family dynamics, plus relationally. Big, got to give credit where credit's due, but an author and instructor that I really appreciate, her name's Sue Johnson, or Dr. Sue Johnson. And she has a thing called emotionally focused therapy. It's a marriage and counseling technique that's used for marriage therapy. And I implement a lot of her stuff within the work that I do when I'm working with couples. Right. And it's one thing that I find, and this is a very generality, because some things aren't always exact, right? But as a generality, I'm still amazed by her work and what I also observe in the families I work with, and how there's oftentimes what is known as a pursuer and a person who's known as an avoider. Now, it's not to say that one is bad or the other. It's just how they're wired. It's how they've been created, okay? The pursuer is the person who is, I want to deal with this now. We got to deal with this. We got to talk about this now. Yep. The avoider is the person who is not that they're trying to not deal with the situation, but oftentimes they get so overwhelmed and bombarded with all the thoughts. And it's like, oh my gosh, here's the pursuer. We need to deal with this. And the pursuer is going, too much information, overload. Okay, it's just, they're going tilt. And so this is where they tend to sometimes flee their response system, what's known as the amygdala, fight, flee, freeze. They sometimes tend to flee. And the pursuer, of course, is fight. Okay.
Yep.
So that's where healthy boundaries and this is more just so you know what I'm talking about are generic Band-Aid solutions.
I know exactly what you're talking about with that, because you see it in
yeah.
married couples very often.
Yeah.
It's rare that you'll have two avoiders married to each other. You can.
It does happen.
It does happen, but or other way too. It does happen, but I have found that it's rare. Usually you'll have one or the other in either one, either the wife or the husband. And you always have to say, well, you need to give the avoider 10 minutes to go and walk and then come back and deal with the situation. Yeah. And I think you're hitting the nail right on the head with what's probably happening in homes right now during this time. And so I think if we could rewind back a little bit, I think what we just talked about, how you can be prepared for that is you might need to have that family talk.
Absolutely.
Right.
Or
and if you don't,
exactly. Yeah. Couple talk
yeah.
Or even knowing your kids. Even from a work situation, knowing your boss, where are they at with that? It can all help that way.
Oh, for sure.
Here's the thing. It's then about creating as best as possible, not saying it is very messy to start off with, because oftentimes these are things we've never tried. We've never practiced before. So it's not a perfect science when I say this. But the pursuer needs to allow the avoider type personality to actually go for an agreed amount of time. All right. But then the avoider, what they're doing is they're processing everything. So they can then come back and actually deal with the situation and not continue running. That's where most things break up. The pursuer needs to allow that space to happen. But the pursuer then needs to go in their space and go, okay, what is the actual real topic? What's the real thing that I'm really needing or wanting out of this? Is it really the 10 things that I'm trying to get out of the situation? No, what's the root issue of what I'm feeling or what I need dealt with in this situation?
Oh, exactly.
And that's what I can talk about. Then the two can come back. Now, as a rule of thumb, I go with the approach that on average, when our adrenaline, gets up when we're in attack mode or when we're in flight mode, it takes on average between 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So you've got to give that time
to calm down.
You got it. And everyone's a little bit different. The alpha male, alpha female type personality might actually need that hour to go for a walk or a drive before they come back. The key is having the ground rule, though, that you have to come back.
That's
and
right.
Vice versa, that you're also going to, that's easier for the pursuer. It's harder for you know what I mean? But it's then having those ground rules. Well, now we're in that conversation. Hey, pursuer, you're not bringing up the 20 different things that you need. No, you've had that time to think about the primary root issue that needs to be dealt with. And let's just deal with that. We're picking that battle.
I love how you said the primary thing there. Whenever myself or Patricia and I have done marriage counseling, after every session, we always give them one thing.
Yeah.
Not 3 steps, I know we're talking about 3 things tonight. That's okay.
Sure.
But for married couples, we give them the one thing. And that's been that has really worked with couples because even after a counseling session, they can leave feeling overwhelmed about everything that was discussed. But if you can boil it down to one thing, and during this time, bring it back to the space that we're talking about during this time, Jeremiah, some people are just joining us too, I think. Jeremiah has been sharing about 3 things. Number 1 during this time, and in life in general, not just during this time, is to 1, create space, 2, routine, so maintain routine, and 3, normalcy. And so, it's so important. I love how you said primary, though. That's so important. As a pastor and from a biblical perspective, we call it returning to your first love. We ask couples, what caused you to feel love for the other person in the first place? If you have stopped doing that, then start doing it again, right? And so, no, that's good.
And here's the thing. If the couple is at a point in their relationship or they get to a point during this time and it's just not working. This is where marriage counseling is very important.
A mediator.
This is where, exactly. Yep. And this is where, you know, in my role, you know, where I come into play is, and I'm pulling out now, it's not even about meeting needs anymore and all that stuff. No, we got to go to the root source. What's actually happening emotionally? Mm-hmm. What's actually going on? And oftentimes we'll find there's just a lack of attachment. There's maybe a lack of awareness. Maybe there is a lack of availability. All right. And that's another thing that Sue Johnson will oftentimes talk about is, are you available? Are you actually present? I mean, we're talking right now, but I mean, I could very easily be like, yeah, oh yeah, I totally agree, Jason. Yeah, I'm here, but am I really here? Am I really available and present? Yeah, exactly. You know, and that's where the counselor can actually come into play and help recognize and catch those little things.
I think that's really important
towards that. Yeah.
It's really important with your children too. I mean, we're talking about spousal,
absolutely.
But like, especially during this time, I've already heard of a few parents where kids are asking questions like, Mom, is this the end of the world, and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so, I mean, you really need to create that space, and you already talked about that for yourself and also for the family, but it's very important for children. We always say that it's the married couple first, because you had one another first before you had children, and you will be the best for your children when you're the best for one another, right? But talking about children, we need to create that space for them during this time as well. And then skipping ahead a bit into routine, man, do children ever need routine?
I'll tell you, I got to give a shout out to my daughter, Alexandria. Okay. Oh my gosh. I was so proud of her this morning because she's been working through some fears and some stuff, and, you know, and just with everything going on, because a lot of changes, a lot of like, oh, it's online school. Okay. Well, yay. You know, not everyone's created to be self-learners. Okay. Some people need that interaction within the school system. Okay. And this is where the number one thing, how do we create routine if we've gotten out of routine? What do I do, Jeremiah? All right. Well, it's not just me, but this is just what other individuals, like some of my information even that I share, another guy, his name is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. He's a medical doctor, PhD, and he's a trauma specialist. Okay. And one of the things that he recommends, and I recommend as well, is just creating predictability. How do you create predictability? Have a schedule. Whether you do a schedule by, you know, whether it's a manual, writing it down in your notebook or day timer, whether it's on your computer, on your phone, create your schedule. Well, my daughter Alexandria this morning, she's like, "Hey, Daddy, do you know what I'm doing?" "Oh, yeah. What are you doing?" You know, she's like, "Oh, I schedule my school in. I schedule where we're gonna have supper. I schedule when I need to do this." And
there you go.
Oh my gosh, she is on step one to success. If this goes on till July, August, etc., because she will now have the beginning pattern of creating predictability to be able to now create normalcy within her life. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. And that's so powerful.
You know, one thing I think has been great about social media, because there's definitely things about it that aren't great. We know that it's a neutral source, just like the internet. It's not bad, good or evil. But what I love about what I've been seeing on Facebook, and I'm sure a lot of the moms, if there's any moms watching this here tonight, have appreciated, is moms are sharing things and resources to help with routines. A lot of parents, moms especially, have been noticing that the kids are snacking all day. And I saw one lady, she had this amazing idea. She had 3 kids, and so she had plastic baskets, all 3 different colors, with snacks in there for the day. So the kids weren't just going and raiding the cupboards and draining the groceries for the week, but they had those snacks for the day. And so I think that's really great, because that there even had to do with routine, right, for children.
Well, I'm now going to take some notes down.
So this is a great thing about social media. That's so cool. It can help with things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing. When we have social isolation, part of that thing is a loss of connection, you know, and even though, and here's the big term, you know, another term that I want to share is the term that it goes like this: similar, but different. Yes. You and I, we would normally do this and go for coffee, and we just be talking like what we're doing right now, you know, And yes, it is different. It's not the same.
Mhm.
You know, many of my clients, you know, it's this actually what you're seeing right now. I might change the angle of the room for fun just to spice things up a bit here and there. But this is video online counseling.
Yeah.
All right. If you were a client and I was talking with you, Jeremiah, you know, what are some suggestions? Or, hey, I'm having some issues. Let's talk about things. This is exactly what's happening.
Mhm.
What right now, you and I talking and connecting. Now, it's not the same, obviously, as face to face.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is there are even studies that have shown for certain topics, certain concepts like depression and anxiety, this medium can actually and has demonstrated to increase in the ability to deal with some of those things. Wow, that's when I read that, oh my gosh, I was blown away and I was like, that's interesting. So, you know, one of my first questions that I'm asking, you know, with all my clientele has been, hey, how is this medium? Is this working okay? You know, and it's like, yeah, actually, this is really good. They've appreciated it, you know. You know, I've got a friend of mine, you know, good friend of mine. He's been doing some work just with some other issues and stuff like that they've been working through in their life and being vulnerable with it and going, yeah, it's time to deal with this stuff. But, and this is no offense to those that are doing it, but their individual they're dealing with this stuff with is all phone. And they're like, man, I want to do what we're doing. I was doing some Zoom conversations with them and they're like, man, this is so much better.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why I've chosen the online format, right?
Well, you know,
So,
because at least in video, you can still see body language. You can see micro
absolutely.
expressions, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
actually
absolutely.
speaking of that,
Yeah.
I've been really, as a pastoral and pastoral care and with my own church, I've been encouraging people during this time, especially. You already mentioned keeping connections with people.
Yeah.
Use this stuff. It is free.
Absolutely.
Like,
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
you're paying for your internet, but of course we all do.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
man, make use of this stuff. We need personal connection with people. It's so important.
Here's the thing. If you go for a Tuesday for a coffee with a friend, all right, that's your regular go-to. But I'm stuck. I'm isolated. What do I do? I know it's different, but create a similar but different habit. Keep it up. Exactly. Have the habit. I'm having my glass of
You have your
water.
glass of water. For those of you who joined later, Jeremiah doesn't drink coffee for good reason. Anyways.
Very good reason.
But no, you're right. We can have coffees.
Yeah,
We can connect. As a matter of
absolutely.
fact, I often, well, throughout life, I always have peer mentors, other pastors that I meet with. They're not always even from the organization that I'm with, but many times they are. There's one gentleman I meet with at least monthly. And so I said, hey, let's just do a Zoom coffee. And so we're going to do that here sometime coming up.
Perfect.
So
that is exactly, you know, that's exactly what I believe at least needs to happen. And that will help create now out of that. You're not just doing a routine, you're creating normalcy within your life. That's so powerful.
That's right.
You know? Yeah. Now, here's the other thing that happens, right, with people, Jason, is great. That's all awesome, Jeremiah, but I am still stuck. I'm still feeling stuck with what I'm doing. And I know what I need to do, but what do I do? Well, that is the other area that when we deal with loss that happens with people, especially in these kind of situations, and that's immobility. Mm-hmm. And what we got to do is create a thing of immobility and transfer it over to be mobile, have mobility. Okay. And one of the things that I've actually this week, actually, that's kind of been one of my little mantras that I've been sharing with everyone this week that I've been talking to, and I'll share with you as well and all your viewers here tonight is really, it is as simple. And again, this is that ridiculous stuff that everyone knows, but you have to still do it in order to get going. In order to go from immobility to mobility, literally what I recommend is you literally have to stand up. All right. That's the first thing you do. Stand up. And then, I'm not kidding, take 2 steps forward wherever you're at. Okay. And even if that's all you do, and then you go sit back down, you have at least done a moment of mobility to work out of whatever you're dealing with, whether it's depression, anxiety, whether it's I'm just so terrified, I'm paralyzed with fear with everything going on. I just heard the news report and oh my gosh, this didn't help me because I've been watching too much news, which by the way, you shouldn't be doing. If that's not your regular routine, if all you do is watch a half hour of news or an hour of news, stick with just watching a half-hour news. That's just a little side plug. Right?
Yeah, and you know what? I want to speak into that real quickly.
Yeah.
I really encourage people, don't leave the news on a TV in your house playing all day.
No.
Because what's going to happen is you're going to get stuck in following the narrative that they feed you.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like, we're not saying don't watch the news. It's like the old religious church days, right? Don't go to the pool hall, don't go to the movie.
Absolutely.
So that's good.
And that's why I allow you, that's why I really appreciate you even, Jason, for allowing this space, because that's one of the concerns I have with media right now, whether it's social media, radio, you name it.
Yep.
There's not even, I mean, unless I'm wrong, I don't even view what I would consider even 10% of education to know how to deal with this stuff. Even just hand washing videos, hey, we're going to take a 2-minute segment and show you how to wash your hands again. As simple as that many people actually don't know how to do properly, but we got to learn how to do it now. All right. Forevermore. And I mean, it was only just last week I started seeing driving on Stony. They just started saying, hey, wash your hands, COVID-19.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. It's like
now, I'm not trying to complain, not trying to blame. Please understand that. But that should have been done a month ago. Do you know what I'm saying? With everything that was going on. And, that's part of that education, lack of education. But because we don't have accountability within media right now, we got to start somewhere. And this is where forums like this, I'm very appreciative of that space to be able to do that with.
Awesome.
My little political side piece there. So.
Yeah. We won't hold that against you. No.
All right.
That's all right. Yeah. And so I'm just repeating them over and over again, the 3, because there's viewers that are coming on later as well. Tonight, Jeremiah has been talking about, what do you call this? Do you call this a process of something or your?
I'll just say a process of how to deal with sudden loss, sudden change, sudden change is just a friendlier way of saying grief and loss.
Okay. And so we're talking about, number 1 is to create space. Number 2 is routine, maintaining routine. And number 3 is normalcy.
But I want to reiterate again, Jason, as far as like the 3 points, the real 2 sub points that I really want to just let all the viewers know again is, number 1, create that schedule, write it out, type it out, have your routine set for the day, which will help create normalcy. And if you're stuck even doing that, then you got to do the real simple step of get up, take 2 steps forward, and then maybe allow another 2 steps to what that next thing needs to be. But even if it's 2 steps, you're at least creating that immobility to have mobility.
That's right. Yeah.
If
you think about it, if a body of water remains still, there's no inlet and outlet, it becomes stagnant.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's really what I feel. Hopefully I'm hearing you correctly, that's what's going to keep things moving and keep things flowing. If that's all you can do, then do it. Because you're right, because fear does paralyze, right? Fear can paralyze people. Awesome. So, and just if there's a few other things, Jeremiah, that another thing that you would like to share, and I'll keep an eye and let you know when there's a question.
Sure. Well, while we're doing that, I guess one thing that's been on my heart as well is just being aware as well as what are your coping mechanisms with all of this. Because here's the thing, if you're not doing that, if you're not creating routine, creating space, creating normalcy in your life, that's going to lead to creating, coping skills. And of course, that can be what I've just talked about is healthy coping skills, but there's the other area of unhealthy coping skills, which of course, and that's my biggest fear that I'm waiting, not to be negative sounding, but I'm kind of waiting for the downfall for those that don't know how to do that and create healthy coping skills. We are going to probably see, more than likely, we'll call it a prediction, we're going to see an increase in drugs and alcohol. We're going to see an increase in the use of pornography because of too much downtime, too much space, alone time, when actually you should be connecting. Even if it's just this, if you're single, you still need to have connection, all right, just like this. If you do have a family and a loved one, you have to hug, touch your kids. It's okay. You have to do that still.
You're in the same house. It's okay.
You're in the same house.
Even with all that's going on.
Sorry, if someone's got it, you got it. All right. So you might as well hug and love each other, And so out of that, those are areas where sometimes people struggle with, like a loss of sense of time and all those different concepts. that we have to be able to maintain connectivity that way. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. So
yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because medicating is not coping.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't want to, and I shared this with you as we were talking about this beforehand, even entertainment can become medicating.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're doing it in excess, and it's like you're ignoring your family because you're watching 7 hours of Netflix binging a show.
That would never happen.
Okay, so we do have a question here.
Sure.
And I'm not going to say people's names, even
That's
though people
fine.
can see it on.
Keep it confidential. So.
Well, people can see it on the text
Yeah.
anyways, but that's okay. So we've got one question. This question is from this person's friend. They said, if you struggle with social anxiety, how do you step out of your shell to connect with others?
Wow, great question. If there is a legitimate issue of social anxiety, I'm again, whether it's myself, whether it's someone else, you got to get help. Counseling is a great way to start dealing with that approach. Okay. Yep. Practically, it's just getting used to it. If this is too difficult, but you can do a phone call, start with a phone call. All right. Yep. But part of that is where you might need to also learn how to get some social skills done, how to actually communicate. All right. So like, how do I communicate? Because I don't know how to talk. Well, practically, it's where you learn basic stuff. What's your name? My name's Jason. Oh, and what do you do during the week? That's one of my little themes that I teach people who actually deal with social anxiety, right? You know, what do you do during, notice what I did. I didn't say, what do you do for a living? How was your day? How's it? No, what did you do during the week? That allows an open space and open door for you to answer how you would choose to do. Jason, what did you do this week?
See, I like that. I like how it's open-ended, but the other questions, like, what were the other questions you said? Like, how's the weather? How was it? Those are so trite. They almost seem like they're not caring. But when you say, how was your week? What did you do? That has a level of, it's personal to a degree.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah,
and it's got to be intentional. You have to mean what you're saying, not just you faking it. Right. But sometimes you got to practice it, right? Yep. And that's where working through with an individual can actually help those things. And then sometimes it's then just, that's more of the clinical side of things, right? Mm-hmm. You know, maybe like in your case, you're going to deal with more of the spiritual side of things. I'm going to come in with more of the clinical side of things. And that can actually be a good partnership sometimes, right? Absolutely. Between, let's say, like yourself as a pastor or spiritual leader and myself as the counselor, mm-hmm. right? And that's where maybe there are some past traumas that need to be worked through, but maybe there's some social skills. Maybe there are some observational or diagnosed issues like, you know, high functioning, you know, I don't know, autism spectrum, ADHD, all those different kind of diagnoses that are out right now. And a lot of those areas, and I mention those because they're areas where sometimes, you don't have the social skills and you haven't learned how to do it. Well, now is as good as time as any to learn how to do it, to break out of that social anxiety. But beyond that, that's also part of, all right, dealing with fear, dealing with loss, dealing with sudden change. And this is where now I have to actually talk with people. You know, I've met people who this is actually very difficult to do, but they can talk on the phone. They can meet with someone face to face. So everyone's got a little bit of a different form of anxiety, I call it, depending on what they are. But there are ways that we can do it, learning about what's called closed-ended and open-ended communication skills, all that kind of stuff. So,
so basically what you're saying as well is that just start somewhere with social anxiety.
Stand up, take 2 steps forward, and go from there.
Yeah, I think sometimes, I could be wrong about this, but this could be an issue with folks that do have anxiety over social things too, is I think sometimes they overthink what might happen.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And that's part of the fears. That's the brain spinning around. Yeah. Practically too, and this is another area, you know, which we don't have time for to go in today, but that's where I'm big on what I call intentional breathing. Okay. Mm-hmm. Not just breathing. All right. Imagine I had a balloon. Okay. If I had a balloon, all right, and it's not filled. All right. And I'm this. Okay. Am I breathing? Yes or no? Yeah, I'm breathing. But what kind of breathing is what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. What I'm doing right now is shallow breathing. Oh, what's going to happen? Oh my gosh, everything's, oh, I'm so scared. the balloon is not being filled. And here's the thing, without going into too much detail, we have to intentionally breathe and start filling the balloon up to connect within our brain, what I call connecting the emotion-centered part of our brain to the cognitive top portion of our brain, all right, our logic, reasoning side. We got to connect the two together so we can connect our emotions with our logical thought so we can be calm, caring. Hey, I can actually have a conversation. I can relax. I'm all good to go.
Yeah.
But as soon as I'm like freaking out and anxious, the brain balloon shrinks. And that's what I call that, the brain balloon. And now we're all emotional based, walking in fear and anxiety and, you know, fear, flight, freeze, all that stuff, because that's where our amygdala is located.
Right.
Okay. So that's why we got to fear it. So that's just a different analogy. Just for
no, and it's an analogy that fits exactly with when someone is hyperventilating. That has to do with breathing. Absolutely. That is connected to anxiety.
You got it. But I'm breathing. No, you're shallow breathing. You're not intentionally breathing.
Exactly. So we have another question here.
Sure.
Oh, hello, Dr. Hazel. She's joining us on here.
Nice. Good to see you, Dr. Hazel.
We have another question from, just trying to see here. How do I create normalcy if I temporarily lost my job? My normalcy is normally connected to work, but now I'm not at work.
Absolutely. So it's taking with what you have right now. And that's a great question because a lot of people are dealing with it or potentially are about to deal with it. Okay. Yeah. And that's where it's taking what you have control of right now in your life. So you would get up, for example, even though you're not getting up for work, if you got up for work at 6 a.m. in the morning, now is not the time to wake up at 10 or 11. You got to create routine of still getting up at 6 and 7 and create normalcy in your life, which will then, out of that routine, as I said, will create normalcy. If you've lost your job, now you have the job of finding a new job, which means that during those working hours, you are online. You are doing the best you can to at least keep an eye out as to what jobs are available. Even if there is none available, you're at least doing your part. And I'll just say this from a pastoral standpoint, since you're a pastor, Jason, this is one of the statements I like to say for those who are more, you know, from a spiritual perspective, is doing your part in the natural to allow God, all right, or in a 12-step perspective, your higher power, to do his part in the supernatural. Okay. It's that creating that partnership. So if you're not working, then you're working. It's just going to look differently. If you've had an idea for a business and I'm not saying you're spending $1,000 or $10,000 on this great business idea. No. I'm saying during some of that downtime, use some of that time to start developing some of those things that you've always thought of. Yep. Maybe there's education and upgrading that you might have an opportunity or availability to talk about. We haven't heard that per se yet from the government. Everyone's talking about how can I get my money and stuff. But what about potential educational opportunities? Yeah. If that comes up and you've been unemployed for a period of time, take the opportunity, get educated, continuous education. All right. Yep. And you should be doing that anyways, even if you are working. Yeah. You know.
So it's a great time. You and I discussed this earlier to pursue opportunities, because there's always opportunities, even in crises. I mean, we all know, as they say, that during times like this, that the rich get richer, but they don't don't get rich. A lot of people think, well, they get richer because they already had money. No, it's not. They don't just sit and hold their money and get richer. They look for opportunities to use what they have. And even if you have less, you still have something that you can use during this time. That's good.
And on a practical standpoint, they bust their butt in that time. Yeah. It's not just, 9 to 5, working on my business, working on my new idea. No. Oh my gosh, now I am working 12 hours because this has to work. I've got a family to feed. Yeah. Okay. From a practical perspective. All right.
That's good. Yeah.
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 And that's another.
And what we're saying is be proactive and you keep the normalcy. I like what you said too, by keeping the same hours.
Absolutely. Right? And I mean, when you have lunch, if you had lunch at 11 o'clock because of your weird shift, continue to have lunch at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, if oftentimes when we talk about forms of loss, one example I like to use is, here's the, it's retirement. People who are going through change just in retirement.
Yeah.
That creates all of a sudden, maybe it's not a sudden change, but many times people are left with going, what do I do now? And maybe you're that cat who is working downtown Calgary, and every second day you'd go to the Devonian Gardens. Well, then when you retire, you still need to go take the drive or take the bus downtown and have lunch at the Devonian Gardens. Yeah, but I'm in isolation now. Okay, then go in your backyard and have lunch.
Yeah.
In nature of some sort, similar but different.
It's keeping that schedule like what we talked about children.
Yes.
We talked about it in regards to children, but we need it just as much. It's a human thing.
Yeah.
As the old adage or saying goes, that we're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
And
so going back to that number one thing, how do I create predictability? How do I create normalcy? Write it out. Create a schedule.
Yeah.
From 8 until 9. I'm going to go look on Indeed. From 9 until 10, I'm going to go to Udemy and do some self-online learning or something like that. Or in your case, with the organization you're a part of, maybe I'm going to take a Bible college class online.
Yeah.
Okay. Those kind of things. Maybe you can add a link to that at the bottom, when we're done this,
for sure.
Those kind of concepts, self-learning, growing, yourself. Okay. In order to help others, all that kind of stuff. Write it out though. Yeah. Now's the time, like never before, to create intentional goal setting.
That's right.
Not just, I'm gonna maybe start it. No. Mm-hmm. In this year, this is what I'm gonna try to do. 2 to 5 years, this is what I'm gonna do. 10, and what's that? One of my favorite authors in the business side of things, his name's Jim Collins, and he's got this thing where he goes, what's your BHAG? Which stands for big, hairy, audacious goal. What's that thing that there's no way this could ever happen, but if it could, that'd be so cool. You need to write it out.
Yeah.
Well, you got time, you might as well do it, but you're not going to do that unless you do again the second part, and that's get up, take 2 steps forward, get your notebook and start writing it out.
That's right.
Get that momentum going.
Exactly. And of course, in all this, we're not saying that there aren't times for rest. That there aren't times to.
No,
so again, that's a part of that normalcy is, well, hopefully your normalcy before all of this or before a big change, hopefully your normalcy included some rest. I'm just being honest, from what I've noticed, being in a city now, we've been here for 5 years, coming from a smaller community, it's go.
Yeah.
And I think this might be a time of resetting for people, that people also begin to realize the importance of getting rest. And so in saying that we want to keep this normalcy, your normalcy from before might have needed corrections.
Yeah.
Right? You weren't resting as good as you should have before. And so I think that needs to be a part of that normalcy as well. And you know what? Schedule it.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with
absolutely.
that. Absolutely.
And guess what? I hate to say this, and this is not to offend any viewer, but it's not rocket science what I've talked about, what we've talked about in the last hour, Jason. But it's the intentionality of it. It's actually doing it. And that's the difference between going, I know I should do this, to actually taking steps to do it. But what a better time now to actually start doing it.
That's right.
Some will, some won't. But that's
actually, it's funny that you said that, because what's the one excuse that most people use for not starting something that they should? I don't have time.
You have time now.
So I think we've completely removed that excuse for the majority of people anyways. And it's so true.
And to take that excuse out, that's where you have to self-evaluate yourself and go, is it really that I don't have time right now? Or is it that I actually don't want to make time right now?
True.
That comes
back to the avoiders.
Exactly. Well, and I'm now making a willful choice.
Right.
So if I'm choosing not to take a moment when I know I should be writing a blog or doing some education, that kind of thing, I have to tell myself, I am making a choice to not do this. So I am responsible and not blaming others for why I'm doing what I'm doing or not doing what I know I should be doing.
Right. Yeah, but again, thank you everybody for joining tonight. And I hope that you gleaned something from this, something that can actually help you and your family and even your friends. You can share this link with them, again, from my Facebook page there as well. And so again, thanks so much, Jeremiah. And just God bless everybody that watched tonight. And I don't know what else to say. How do you end a webinar?
Virtual high five, bro.
Virtual
Yeah.
high five.